This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. The leaders of Africa's two biggest economies meet. But how far will the xenophobic violence in South Africa hang over talks between President Buhari and President Ramaphosa? Job losses at one of the largest sports betting companies in Kenya as it stops business operations in the country amid a tax row. Also in the program, a global epidemic in child obesity. We'll be looking at how the continent fits into the trend and how to combat a condition blamed in part on the relentless marketing of junk food. And in sports, Florentin Pogba, older brother of Manchester United's Paul Pogba, is recalled to the Guinean national team. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has begun his three-day state visit to South Africa by calling for the protection of foreign nationals. It follows a wave of xenophobic attacks in Johannesburg in September. Now, the violent attacks against mostly foreign-owned shops stirred diplomatic tension between Africa's leading economies and led to the death of 12 people. Most of them were South Africans. The BBC's Nomsa Maseko reports from Pretoria.
Reigniting relations between two African superpowers. The much-anticipated state visit by Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari was amplified by the escalation of attacks against foreigners last month. Johannesburg saw a wave of violence largely directed at foreign-owned businesses. Shops were looted, property was damaged, and car dealerships went up in smoke. The attacks resulted in the killing of 12 people, most of whom were South African. None were Nigerian. Nigeria has since repatriated hundreds of its citizens and urged South Africa to do all it can to protect those who stayed behind. Today, President Buhari reiterated the call, but also cautioned his countrymen.
Our two countries have also agreed to unequivocally address the challenges in our relations, including recent people-to-people challenges that saw attacks against foreign nationals, including Nigerians and their properties, which we strongly condemn. I think Nigerians know the stand of the leadership, that when you are in Rome, you do what the Romans do.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa once again condemned the attacks.
We are committed to addressing the genuine concerns of our people on issues such as poverty, unemployment, crime, drugs, and migration. We are equally committed to upholding the rule of law and ensuring that all those involved in criminal activities, regardless of their nationality, are prosecuted.
The red carpet was rolled out for Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari for a state visit, which was planned long before the xenophobic attacks. What is clear is that the relationship at a government-to-government level is much more sound compared to social relations on the ground. Tensions remain high between locals and foreign nationals, but outbreaks of violence targeted at African migrants have been contained. Nomsa Maseko, BBC News, Pretoria.
Well, let's bring in the BBC's Vumani Mkize in Johannesburg and Mayeni Jones in Lagos. Mayeni, let me start with you. What do people in Nigeria make of this trip by President Buhari to South Africa? Are they less angry?
Definitely a lot less anger here. Just a few weeks ago, we were seeing Nigerians taking to the streets of Lagos, Abuja, and other major Nigerian cities to target South African businesses as a way of taking revenge against what they saw as the unfair persecution of Nigerians in South Africa. But weeks later, the situation here is a lot calmer than it was. The police here used its usual heavy-handed tactics to make sure that people were dissuaded from coming back and looting any more businesses. And I have to say the atmosphere here now is a little bit subdued. People aren't talking about this visit necessarily. Xenophobia, has been replaced by other topics in the news. And I think there is a feeling that they're glad that the president is out there, trying to represent their interests, but they've also moved on.
Vumani, the president, Ramaphosa, last month in an interview said, and I quote, "We should be ashamed." Are South Africans ashamed?
Of South Africans being ashamed. Like the issue of xenophobia, it happened in a very small pocket of Johannesburg, in Jeppe, and also in a small pocket in Pretoria as well. In terms of numbers, 12 people were killed, 10 were South Africans and 2 were Zimbabweans. But the issue of Nigerians being killed, none of them were actually killed. But in terms of the scourge of xenophobic violence, South Africans consistently have condemned it throughout the different periods where we've had violence in 2008, in 2015 and in 2019. But President Cyril Ramaphosa was echoing a sentiment among South Africans who do feel that it really puts a stain on South Africans, this consistent violence meted out against foreign nationals here in the country, Sophie.
So how then significant is it, these trade deals that they have signed, economically really and symbolically?
Sure. Well, 32 trade agreements were signed between Nigeria and South Africa. And so there's a greater indication that South Africa and Nigeria need to be working together in order to create prosperity between both countries. Because if you look at both economies, they are plagued by slow growth, high unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, and it's been described as a ticking time bomb for both countries. So economically, these two countries need to be working together instead of against each other in order to create greater growth within these two countries. And it also, if you look at the Continental Free Trade Agreement, Sophie, for it to work and for it to be implemented properly, South Africa and Nigeria, the two biggest economies on the continent, need to be working together, and they need to be signing trade deals, and they need to be ensuring that there's greater economic participation between both of them.
Mayeni, let me bring you in here, because there were people who came back to Nigeria from South Africa. Is there a feeling that they would like to go back to South Africa to conduct their business?
Well, many of the returnees who came back told us that they were actually told they wouldn't be able to go back to South Africa for at least 5 years. That was one of the conditions of them getting this free flight to come to Nigeria. So from what we understand, the number of those who've returned will not be able to return to South Africa and start their businesses again. For some of them, this is good news. They were relieved to leave the country. They said that they'd lost many things and that they always felt unedged, as if they were being blamed for doing well economically, financially, and that they thought that blame was unfair. But there are many people, as Vumani said, the economy here isn't doing great. Unemployment has tripled in the last 5 years. They might find that some of the economic opportunities that they're seeking here might not exist either.
Vumani, so the President Buhari will be there for another day. What should we expect to happen now?
Sure. So tomorrow, the President is going to be attending a town hall meeting in Pretoria, home to a significant number of Nigerian expatriates who are living there. And essentially at the town hall meeting, it's going to be a fact-finding mission for President Buhari. He's going to be listening to Nigerians who are living here in South Africa, to hear their concerns, to hear the experience of living here in South Africa, to hear if they've faced any discrimination, and to find out about the economic opportunities that they are seeking here in South Africa, and possibly the reasons why they left Nigeria as well. So those are the issues that Buhari will be trying to listen from his compatriots living here in South Africa, Sophie.
All right. Thank you both. Vumani Mkhize in Johannesburg and Mayeni Jones in Lagos. Thank you. Now, the Ugandan pop star who now leads an opposition party, Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine, has denounced the Ugandan army's ban on his supporters wearing the red military beret. Bobi Wine's People Power supporters wear red shirts, black trousers and a red beret to show support for regime change. Now, the army says civilians caught wearing the red beret could end up in jail. Bobi Wine called the ban a sham. Now to Kenya, where 400 people have lost their jobs. In one of the country's largest betting firms, SportPesa, has fired all of its employees just a few days after it decided to stop operations in the country. Now, it's after a decision to impose a 20% tax on all betting stakes. Government officials have raised concerns over money laundering and the impact that betting is having on young Kenyans. As BBC's Mercy Juma reports.
SportPesa has been in operation in Kenya for the last 5 years, and today its 362 employees received their termination letters. The company says for the last 3 months it has not made any revenue and therefore cannot sustain its employees.
I'm a father of an 11-month-old baby, and that 11-month-old baby needs to drink milk in the morning, does not care that you are laid off or not. You still have to put up a smile. You have to wake up tomorrow and, inspire people, tell people we are okay, even though you are not okay.
All the dreams, the plans that you had between now, in the long term, in the short term, you just have to forget them for a while, maybe hoping that a job will come by.
The company says the decision by the government to introduce a 20% tax on betting stakes hurts the operating environment, keeping in mind that there were already pre-existing taxes that were levied on winnings by gamblers as well as on the betting companies themselves. The government has raised concerns about tax evasion by some of these betting companies. Similarly, there have been concerns raised about the betting culture in Kenya, and these betting companies have been associated with gambling addiction, squandering of earnings, and some people getting entrapped in debt.
Everybody wants big money. So when you have a ritual like this, 50 shillings, you say that if I come there, I do this, my money will double. Of course, it may double, but the probability of losing is high.
Senior management at SportPesa did not give a comment on these issues, saying they are still in consultation with the government. At the same time, another betting company, Betin, has announced it is ceasing operations in Kenya, and there are fears that if nothing changes, the company too may lay off its staff. Mercy Juma, BBC, Nairobi.
Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. There have been street protests in Mali over the deaths of 25 soldiers killed fighting jihadists near the border with Burkina Faso. The country is observing 3 days of national mourning for the dead. 50 soldiers are still missing. Military wives and their families joined in the protests, claiming the troops had no air support. The government in Tanzania says none of the 200,000 Burundian refugees in the country will be repatriated by force. It had earlier given the 1st of October as a deadline for the Burundians to leave Tanzania. The UN says only around 300 of the refugees have volunteered to go back to Burundi. Now, America's ambassador to Somalia says the re-establishment of the U.S. embassy in Mogadishu is significant and historic. The new embassy will be based at Mogadishu Airport. The U.S. closed its last embassy 28 years ago as the country descended into a chaotic civil war. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, he's been out for 18 months due to a misdiagnosed injury and personal problems. But when will 800 meters world record holder David Rudisha return to the tracks? I'm Sophie Ikenye, and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: Nigeria's President Buhari meets President Ramaphosa in Pretoria. The state visit is dominated by the recent xenophobic violence in South Africa. Job losses at one of the largest sports betting companies in Kenya, SportPesa, as it stops business operations in the country amid a tax row. Now, it's a growing problem on the continent and across the world. New research has predicted that childhood obesity will soar over the next decade, overwhelming health services everywhere. Now, the study by the World Obesity Federation says the number of children classified as obese will rise to around 250 million by 2030. That's up from 150 million today. By 2030, it's predicted that 12 African countries will have over 1 million obese children each year. According to the World Health Organization, obesity is a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attacks, and a variety of cancers. Well, let's bring in Dr. Jean-Marie Dangu from the World Health Organization. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. Now, obesity has been described as one of the most blatantly visible and yet most neglected public health problems. Is this a deliberate neglect, do you think?
Thank you for the opportunity to reflect on obesity in Africa in particular. I don't think that in our region it has been neglected. It's just because during the past years, the rate of people living with obesity has raised a lot. And the fundamental cause of overweight and obesity, as we all know, is an energy imbalance between calorie consumed and calorie we expend. So, in fact, the region has started as soon as we get alerted about obesity and overweight in the region, putting in place strategies, advising countries to take seriously this new public health problem in the region.
It's interesting you mentioned advising countries. Are there none that are heading in that direction to try and deal with the issue of obesity?
Yes, for sure. Several of them do have national policies to address obesity issues, even at childhood or at the entire duration of a life course. It's not only during the childhood that the obesity is a problem, but also during the adulthood, obesity and overweight are all serious problems for health.
What would be your biggest or first advice for anyone watching and they're thinking, what can I do now practically to avoid a situation where I have to deal with a deadlier situation later?
The advice should be directed towards different population. Let's start with the advice toward the governments. The governments should put in place the policies, the interventions to prevent the occurrence of obesity and overweight in the entire population. And for that, there are several guidance policy documents which were developed and approved at global level, but also at the level of the region in Africa. So countries now, which already committed to implement those policy documents, should implement them effectively. At individual level, we should warn the population, the communities, the families, and the individuals on what to do. Particularly, we should avoid those junk foods. We should avoid processed food. We should go for healthy foods, rich in vegetables, in fruits, and all exclude to our food sugar-sweetened beverages.
So basically a lifestyle and diet change is what you individually advise people to take on. Thank you very much indeed for taking time to talk to us, Dr. Jean-Marie Dangu. Thank you. You are watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. Newly appointed Guinea manager Didier Sis has named former captain Florentin Pogba in his first squad. The Frenchman has called 23 players for the friendly internationals against Comoros on the 12th of October in France and Chile 3 days later in Spain. 29-year-old Pogba, who is the older brother of Manchester United's Paul Pogba, has not played for the Sili Nacional since June 2017. Fit again, Liverpool midfielder Naby Keita and Napoli's Amadou Diawara are also included as Sis prepares for his first game in charge of the West Africans. Moroccan centre-back Mehdi Benatia has announced his retirement from international football. Benatia, who is 32 years old, made 62 appearances for Morocco and scored 2 goals. The Atlas Lions captain moved to Al Duhail in Qatar in January after more than 2 years with Juventus. He joins 2 other fellow Moroccans, Mbarek Boussafa and Karim Al-Ahmadi, who also retired from international football following the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations. Meanwhile, the Chelsea duo of Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori have been called for England's Euro 2020 qualifiers away to the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. On Wednesday, 22-year-old Tammy Abraham had said he had not decided on his international future. Both Abraham and Tomori are eligible to play for Nigeria through their parents, but this eligibility would cease if they play in either game. But one player who is pushing for a call-up to the Super Eagles is winger Iyai Atiemwen, who plays his football with Dynamo Zagreb in Croatia. He says he is biding his time and waits to be called upon to serve.
Everyone will love to wear the good white green for Nigeria, so when it's time for me, I believe I will show myself when I'm invited. You know, we got a lot of population, so whatever chance you are given, you must go and do all you can. So I'm just waiting for the right time, for the right call. That's all.
Now, David Rudisha's name means to return in Swahili. The 30-year-old 800-meter world record holder has not competed for 18 months due to a misdiagnosed injury, a ghastly car crash, and personal issues including his father's death and the breakdown of his marriage. He's in Doha watching the World Athletics Championships, and the BBC's Celestine Carone managed to catch up with him and ask when he'll be returning to the tracks.
Well, this is really what I'm working on, and I'm very positive. After my injury, I want to try my best to see if I will make for next season. And my main aim is 2020 Olympics, and I'm really working hard and making sure that I'll be fit. I had a sitting bone. It was a ligament problem, and it was bad because I was advised to stop completely because ligaments take much longer to heal than muscles. But now, after 1.5 years, I feel like the pain is completely gone.
Did you ever think of quitting?
I had a lot of plan, with my career, and I've never thought of just stopping just like that. Because even before I was injured, I was already looking into 2020 Tokyo Olympics.
Do you think you can still run fast?
Definitely, the talent is there, and I'm still young. Of course, I know I can do something fast. I believe it.
The great David Rudisha speaking to the BBC Celestine Carone there. Sophie, that's your sports.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Well, let's now update you with some developing news. In Cameroon, President Paul Biya has ordered the prosecution of more than 300 people linked to the separatist crisis in the country's English regions to be dropped. Now, Mr. Biya's announcement coincides with a national conference which is taking place to try to resolve the ongoing conflict in a country where French is the dominant language and English speakers have formed a separatist movement. Now, 3,000 delegates are at the talks, but many of the Anglophone representatives have declined to attend. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Sikenye. But that's Focus on Africa for now. Thanks for your company.